Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of First Samuel, carrying on from First Samuel chapter 17, verse 17. Now, yesterday when we left off, we found that the Philistines, that would be Goliath, it is the one and only in this story. Now, perhaps Goliath may not be his name, it could be a title, but nevertheless, that's the only reference we have to Goliath. And it says that he came forward. Actually, he was taunting them. He would come near, come near the Israelites when they woke up and when the sun set, when it grew dark. All right. For 40 days, he actually did that. Now, that's a long time to taunt the Israelites. He took a stand means he presented himself. Now, in the old days when they were fighting, that is probably how they would do it. Now, I recall that I was reading the ancient history of the Japanese occupation of China. They would challenge the Chinese to fight on the stage. And every day they would have a champion. They would come out and they would use that to taunt the Chinese people to make them feel small. Now, that's the whole, I guess, a very similar situation. And in verse 17, the narrative continues, and this is not at that place. It moves back and forth from David and then talk a little bit about what Goliath did, and then goes back to Jesse and David's conversation. So Jesse said to David, he says, "Go take for your brothers an ephah." And ephah, it would be, well, I guess quite a lot of roasted grain so that they have something to eat. Uh, and these 10 loaves would be of bread, right? And I guess you say 10 loaves, it would be 10 bread. That in English it doesn't sound right, right? 10 bread would sound weird, but literally it's 10 bread. And of course the English would try to put in some descriptive word, and so 10 loaves instead, and told him to run to the camp of your brothers. Now, we have read earlier on that the brothers were there, the first, second, and third brother. Jesse also told David not only to bring for the brothers, bring these 10. Now, it says here 10 cuts or 10 slices or 10 something that has been, this word here is, has been cut out, right? However you may want to call it, 10 slices or 10 pieces of, and this would be cheese, right? This would be cheese, halav, and it's also the same word used today. This is the fat part of the milk made into cheese. To the commander of their 1,000. So commander of 1,000 really is the military leader, responsible for 1,000 of the troops. And then ask, this what you look into the welfare of your brothers, literally says, go visit your brothers, visit your brothers for shalom. Now, the idea here, of course, in the English, it says, look into the welfare of your brothers. It's go and visit and and see if they are whole. I think that would be a way of understanding. See if they are shalem. The word shalem is whole. And if they are whole, then they are shalom. That's the play of word. And then the father says, then bring back news of them. The word news here is come back and exchange news with me, right? So this idea here is to exchange with me. So the father is concerned about the three sons out there. He has no idea and sends David to check on them. Now let us observe how that encounter might pan out. In verse 19, it reads this way: For Saul and they and all the men of Israel are in the valley of uh, Elah, fighting with the Philistines. Now, we know from the narrative that they are not literally fighting. So let me just repaint that picture, which was described to us. They were in two sets of hills, right? Philistines and Israel, both on the high ground. And in the valley itself, you would find there is Goliath taunting, right? Goliath or Goliath, right? Taunting the Israelites. Now, that's basically the picture now that we have. And so David rose early. This would be to this word rose early uh, is to cause himself to make an early start. So it's gonna be quite a journey, and he decided to do that in the morning. You know, when the it slowly becomes bright. And then he left the flock with the keeper, took the things that Jesse asked him to do, to take, and then went as Jesse had commanded him. And this is an important aspect to see that David listens to Jesse very well. The expression is went as Jesse had commanded him to do exactly as he was told. And he came to the circle of the camp while the army was going out in battle array, shouting the war cry. Now, very interestingly, this is somewhat a shouting match right now, right? Shouting back and forth. And they were all drawing out battle array, arranging themselves. So the word battle array, so drew up in battle array, army against army, Israel against Philistines, is to go in some, how should we say, uh, arrange themselves for battle. Now, the question I think we could ask is, how many times can they rearrange themselves in 40 days? In verse 22, then David left his bag in the care of the bag keeper. And it's an interesting expression. This is really not a bag keeper, but this is someone who is actually taking care of, well, I guess his tools, right? Whatever he was bringing with him. And then there would be somebody who would take care of all these, well, bags and tools and implements. And so he ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. Now, this is interesting because the brothers are actually in the battle line. What does that mean is, if this was the hills, and this would be the Israel side, right? Israel side. The people would be lined up on top, looking down, okay? And however they form, I don't know. But behind there would be the camps, right? Would be the camps. And behind here will be people to guard what they have brought. And so David would have come from this side, left the bags, and then went in to look for the brothers. Now that is what verse 22 is trying to say. And try to, well, it says here, in order to greet his brothers. The word here means to ask. To ask his brothers for shalom. I think that the idea here is go there, greet the brother, ask the brothers, check on them how they are. So that is a very Hebrew way as well. The Middle Eastern Arabic would say assalamualaikum. Here would be a greeting in peace. And look at the rest of the narrative to see the relationship between David and his brothers. Verse 23, as he was talking to them, behold, it says here, behold, look, or pay attention. There's an attention here. The champion, this would be the one who is going to stand in between them. Again, let me explain. This word champion is the one who stands in the space, right? So we have the Philistines, and then we have the Israelite. And then they would have somebody to represent them to fight. And this is the champion. And Israel is supposed to bring out someone to fight as well. Their champion, and this is where the battle will be. And the rest are arranged behind them and they will fight. And that fight will determine the outcome. And so the description here is the Philistine from Gath. The Philistine from Gath is named Goliath, was coming out from the army of the Philistines and spoke these words again and again. And David heard them. And David looked around when all the men of Israel saw the man. Who is the man here? And that would be Goliath. This is the man. Every time Goliath came out, the men of Israel fled from him and were greatly afraid. This is a description, and basically saying that they were terrified. They have never fought anyone that big. Now, this to give you an idea that when the Israelites were about to enter the promised land and they saw the Anakim were people with long necks and probably tall, and the Israelites were very afraid. And this was exactly the same behavior. They were very afraid of this man, tall. And we were talking yesterday that he would be something between 8.5 to 9 feet tall. Very much the heads and shoulders way above everybody. And he was there alone in the valley, taunting the Israelites. Verse 25, the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy, right? The word is to defy. The idea of defy here literally means to taunt, right? To taunt. To make Israel feel small. And it will be that the king will enrich the man, any man, but this particular man. What is this particular man supposed to do? This particular man is supposed to kill him, and that man will have great riches and will give him his daughter and will make his father's house free in Israel. This idea is to be released, to be exempt, right? To be exempt. Now, it could be from taxes, it could be from any other encumbrances. But the whole idea is that it will be a liberated house from all obligations. Now, this was the king's offer to a particular man. And the condition is kill Goliath. Basically that. Verse 26. It says that David spoke to the men who were standing by him, just next to him as he was looking down the hill. What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach, the shame from Israel? So the taunting gives shame. It's trying to shame. So if you recall, the Japanese were trying to shame the Chinese. And so David was saying, for this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should taunt the armies of the living God. Now, this is a very telling piece of information. It is quite rare to find this statement being made. The living God, right? The living God. The God who lives. And it's with reference to Jehovah. What is so telling is that David knows Jehovah very well. And he knows that God cannot be put to shame. And this uncircumcised Philistine is doing just that. For 40 days, he wasn't too concerned about his rewards, but he's actually looking that these are armies of the living God. And whenever we talk about armies, the usual word would be Jehovah Sabaoth. And God would be the general of that army. And right now it's Saul. And God is no longer with Saul, but David is. And so David is now looking after the interest of God on behalf of God in this little battle with the Philistines. Verse 27, the people answered him in accord. In accord, literally says what? The people were saying to David, this word, right? I guess when it says in accord, this is an interpretation. There is no, well, I should say, there is no Hebrew word for in accord. I'm not saying that it is wrong, but it does give you the impression that the people had the same answer. And so in accord is not really wrong, right? It's not really wrong. So thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Understand, the idea here is to slay. The word kill is to cause him to die, right? Or destroyed, right? Or be destroyed. So the idea here is this is the condition of anything else that needs to be done. Don't think about the riches, just kill the Philistines. Now, in verse 28 gives us a very telling picture of the relationship between David and his brothers. Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when this would be David, David was speaking to the men, and Eliab's anger, this is hot nose, right? He had a hot nose, or his nose was hot uh, towards David. So he was very angry. And Eliab said, we need to actually identify who is speaking, right? And Eliab said, so why have you come down? Why did you come? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? So it says that few sheep, there are not many, but we really don't know how many. But the other way is also to say that they are sheep. The word few, right? The word few is also, it means little worth. So David was looking after some sheep, but to them it's worth little. It is all out there in the desert, in the wilderness. And David was the youngest, or the smallest, or the most unimportant, or the insignificant. And the insignificant will be there to tend insignificant sheep, not in terms of number, but in terms of value. So the reaction is very interesting. Why did you come down? Who did you leave? Or who did you abandon? Those few, this word here is flock, right? It won't be sheep, it will be flock. The worthless flock in the desert. And then he says, I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart. Now you can see that the trouble between the brothers and David, because the brother like Eliab has very nasty things to say to David, says that he is insolent, he is arrogant, right? This is what is arrogant. You're a proud boy, or a proud man. The other one is wicked, Ra. You're doing things that is not good in your heart, in your mind. I know what you're thinking now, right? You are trying to run away from your responsibility and spend some time to see the battle. It's like a game, right? That's basically what he's saying. You have come down in order to watch the battle, to see the war, to observe this event. And then David asks, what have I done now? What did I do? Was it not just a question? Now, this word question was the words that he said. What does this refer to? A question refers to verse 26. And verse 27, the people answered him. And so David was saying, I merely asked a question. Why get angry? Right? Why get angry? And so I just want to show you that the text itself shows the animosity towards David. I would say Psalm 69, if you had a chance to read, probably describes that relationship between the brothers and David quite aptly. The difference between the two then would be David's affection for God, David's knowledge of God, David's realization of his role with God. He has been anointed, and God has given him a character, a kingly character, that he's bold, he's fearless, he is fit for a king. And before the eyes of God. Verse 30. Then he turned away from him to another. Now this is David. Turned away from Eliab, spoke to another man, and asked the same thing. And the people answered the same as before. Kill the Philistines. When the words which David spoke were heard, they told them to Saul, and he sent for him. What were the words which David spoke? His question. What will happen? Right? What will happen? What will happen to the man who kills the Philistine? He's been asking the same question over and over again, and somehow it had gotten to Saul. And when Saul sent for David, and David said to Saul, David is encouraging Saul, let no man's heart fail on account of him. The word fail here is fall. Fall will be lose hope, right? Lose heart. So let no man's heart fail or fall because of him, right? Because of who? Goliath. Because everyone is so afraid of Goliath. Now, David is offering, your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And this would be, at least if we were to read it, it seems that David is out of his mind. But Saul knows David, so says, your servant will go. He will walk down, he will fight with this Philistine. Verse 33. Then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against the Philistines to fight with him. Now, what does that mean? You are not able. You cannot. So it means that you cannot prevail. You cannot overcome. These are the words. You are not able to be victorious. Right? You do not have the strength. Now, these are all good translation for this word, not able, with regards to the Hebrew. So you can't win. You can't overpower him. You cannot be the victor here. You don't have the strength to go against this Philistine. So this is a specific Philistine to fight, to do battle with him. And then it says here, for you are a youth while he has been a warrior from his youth. Now, what does it mean? It says you are a youth. Now, compared to Goliath, David is young. So understand this. This is comparing between David and Goliath. So if you compare the two, David is young. Only in contrast, Goliath is much older. more experience. That is the definition or the contrast of youth. That he has been a fighting man, a man of war. Right? That is the whole context here. It's not that David is a little kid. Although based on this word, many of the stories come back to show David is like a little kid. But David should be about 28 now. David said to Saul, "Your servant was tending his father's sheep." I think this word sheep should be flock, right? It doesn't say sheep, it doesn't have to be sheep. It's a flock. It could be a flock of goats, sheep, small animals, basically. So your servant, talking about himself, and he's very humble because he is there to serve Saul. I am pasturing, pasturing, pasturing my father's sheep. Now, if a bear and lion, the bear, and this word here is not a bear, it is the lion and the bear. The lion and the bear. Now, maybe the Jews have something symbolic of that, but lions and bears are there, and these are enemies. Enemies that came and took a lamb from the flock. Now, this word lamb is se. It can be a sheep and or a goat. Now, it's unfortunate that the English seems to point out to only one, but it's actually sheep and goat, right? Sheep and goat. And so when you have the Ari and the dove, right? The lion is Ari, the bear is the dove, came, and then it took a lamb, and this is correct, from the flock and took away. Look at what David did. I went out after him. What is after him? Behind. And then this denotes a chase. And then attacked. Now, this word attack in verse 35 is to slay, cause. Attacked him is cause to slay. This is the same word as the request by Saul. Anyone who can slay the Philistine. Same word. If you can attack and slay the Philistine, David is saying, I went out after the lion or the bear. And then I attacked them. I attacked him and then he died. All right. He died. And rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard. This word is to be strong. It is to, I guess you could say, took hold. Seize him would be to take hold. By his beard, and that would be the chin, right? Took hold of his chin. It doesn't necessarily have to mean beard. Chin is also good. So taking the animal by the chin and then to strike. This is that same word. The word struck, attack, they're all the same. They're all the same. And killed him. The word kill, finally, is to cause him to die. Now, the reason why we use the pronoun him is because in Hebrew there is um, no neuter gender. Like animals, it is also denoted by a masculine or feminine, so that you know. And in this case, the lion and the bear are masculine animals. And so this word his is denoting these animals, the male animals. And that is how the narrative is provided for us. Verse 36. Now, verse 36 says, your servant has killed. The word kill is to strike, fight, slay. All of these are the same meanings, right? Uh, the lion, and see, notice this is now correct. The lion, not a lion or a bear. And then this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. It's just like a lion and a bear. Since he has taunted the armies of the living God, and this again, I want to point out to you, the living God denotes how David, right? How David looks at God. He is a living God. He will be able to do things. He is not a stone. He is there, well and alive. Verse 37, and this is his expression. He says, and David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion, this word, and from the paw of the bear. So let me just break that down. Who delivered, who saved, right? Who liberated. So he ascribes it to God who saved him from the hand of the lion and the hand of the bear. He, God, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And so this understanding is important because of how he sees God. This is confidence in God. Notice this confidence is not, how should we say, it's not an overnight thing, I guess. You could say that this didn't happen last night as he was walking towards the battleground. This was how he has always known Jehovah God. And when in chapter 16, when God says, I have looked at all the sons of Jesse and I want David, is, to me, it is most likely the character of David that has attracted God to choose him, because the mind of David is thinking about God all the time. And in his actions are always relating to God to save him all the time. And hence, David is seen and expressed by God as a man after his heart. After means behind, following the mind of God. And this is following the mind or the heart of God. This is the key. This is the key. A man after my heart, following the mind of God. And this is what he has said. The words that he utters describes that relationship, describes that confidence he knows of God. And Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. So the idea here is to go, walk down there, and God be with you. The idea here is literally together with. Now, God may not be with Saul, but Saul still knows God, that he is there looking after Israel, but he is not succeeding. Saul is not succeeding. In fact, he couldn't move anywhere until David came and gave a way out for him. And so he's saying, may God be with you. And as you have said that God will rescue you from the hand of the lion and from the bear, the Philistine is no different. He will be like the lion and the bear. And with this, we come to the end of our segment today, and we will continue next week into verse 38.